hospital here in Washington, D.C., brought us into the so-called charity ward, and we waited to see who would walk through the door with the name Dr. So-and-so to take care of my daughter. I never felt more inadequate in my life as a father and a husband and not having health insurance. We got through it, she got through it too, and lived a good life. But the point was, there were moments when I worried that I couldn't provide the basics for my baby because I didn't have health insurance. 15 million Americans will lose their health insurance because of this Republican budget that I just referred to, the big, beautiful budget. 15 million will lose health insurance. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So when the Democrats say there are health care issues that are part of this debate on funding the government, that's what we're talking about. Keeping these hospitals open, critical hospitals in inner city as well in rural areas, making sure that people have their health insurance. And there's one third element I would add, I don't think we'll be able to negotiate it. Medical research. Ever hear of the National Institutes of Health? Why, sure you have. It's the best medical research agency of any government in the world. I went to the NIH about 12 years ago and met with Dr. Francis Collins, an amazing man who is head of the NIH. And I said to him, I really believe in what you do. Your research in cancer and heart disease and so many other things makes a difference. What can I do to help you? Well, he said, thank you for asking. There have been some people who've done remarkable things. I said, I remember there was a bipartisan coalition a few years back that doubled the budget in medical research for NIH. I said, I wish I could say I could do that again, but I don't think I can. What can I do? He said, give me and this agency 5% real growth each year in medical research, and we'll light up the scoreboard. We are so close finding cures and new drugs in so many areas that if you can give us consistent research, it'll make a difference. Came back to the Senate, sat down with my friends on both sides of the aisle. Roy Blunt, Republican senator from Missouri, was a leader in this effort. Lamar Alexander, Republican senator from Tennessee, another leader. Patty Murray, still serving as head of the Appropriations Committee and one of the best when it comes to medical research. We put our heads together, and over a span of 10 years, the budget for NIH medical research went from $30 billion to $48 billion. We got the 5% coming every single year. It was quite an achievement. 60% increase in that budget. Things were happening, good news, good developments when it came to cures and treatments. I was so proud of that effort and glad that it was bipartisan from the start. So what did the Trump budget suggest we do with medical research? Cut it back from 48 billion to 30, where we started 10 years ago. You know what happens when you cut back on research that basic? You know what happens, and I do too. When that terrible diagnosis happens at the doctor's office, it breaks your heart, and you finally stop crying and you say to the doctor, is there anything you can do? Is there a surgery, a medicine, anything you can do for someone I love very much? They say, well, there's a clinical trial. There's medical research underway, and it's a long shot, but you got a chance. It's hope. Medical research is hope. And it's one of the areas where I think Donald Trump's cuts are the most heartless cuts of all. Democrats care about this. I do. I'm willing to fight over it. I'm not willing to say, well, we'll just go on business as usual. Let's accept this. Let's cut back $1 trillion out of Medicaid. Let's take 15 million Americans and take away their health insurance. Let's cut back $18 billion in medical research each year. And we'll say it's just a clean, continuing resolution bill. That's what we're fighting over. Is it important? For me, it's one of the most important things we can do in terms of helping families across America. And let me tell you something that's going on. You should know about it. You will soon if you're covered by it. Health insurance has tax treatment that helps you pay the premiums. It makes a dramatic difference. And now, in a matter of days, health insurance companies are going to announce what the new premiums are going to be because of the budget bill, the big, beautiful budget bill of President Trump. They're going to go up dramatically. And as these premiums go up, some people won't be able to pay for them, and they'll be without health insurance, and others will see their family budget explode with an increased health insurance premium. That's the reality of this debate. It's not about who gets bragging rights and gets to beat on their chest, a Democrat or Republican. In my mind, it's a question of whether families across this country can count on us for the basics, and making sure that health care is there for America is one of the basics as far as I'm concerned. There's another issue I want to raise, relates to the administration, and you have to go back in history to appreciate it. Richard Nixon. Students of history, of course, know that name. Former vice president of the United States, former senator, he was a senator and a congressman, vice president under President Eisenhower, and then president of the United States. He went through a period we know as Watergate. It was controversial. Some people broke into Democratic National Headquarters. They were caught. They were prosecuted. When it was all over, we had the Watergate investigation, and ultimately President Nixon resigned. But before he resigned, he instructed his staff to give him background information on his enemies list, the people that he considered to be his political enemies. And the word was out that they were going to be treated harshly by his administration, whether it's Department of Justice or the Internal Revenue Service. Well, we went through that chapter, he resigned, and then Congress came together, Democrats and Republicans, and said, we can never let this happen again. We can't let a president put his finger on somebody and say, that's a political enemy, go prosecute him, try to find him guilty of a crime, make sure they pay a fine, give him bad publicity. We agreed on a bipartisan basis for standards between the White House, the Department of Justice, and Congress when it came to these political decisions that could ultimately result in prosecution. Well, under President Trump, we're back into the Nixon conversation about enemies lists, except President Trump's enemies list is longer than anything Richard Nixon ever dreamed of. And that's what we're looking at now. On September 20th, the acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Seibert, announced his resignation. Acting U.S. Attorney appointed by Trump resigned. Mr. Seibert resisted President Trump's demands to bring charges without sufficient evidence against New York Attorney General Letitia James and former FBI Director James Comey. Mr. Seibert, a Republican appointed by Donald Trump just a few weeks ago, stayed true to his oath to the Constitution and his commitment to follow the facts and the law. And for that, he was forced to resign his office. In his place, President Trump installed his personal attorney, an attorney with no experience as a prosecutor, never did it before, to indict James Comey in a politically motivated case considered by career prosecutors in that office too weak to bring charges. This indictment represents the latest step in President Trump's long crusade to weaponize the federal government against his perceived political enemies, a return to the days of Richard Nixon. We remember when the president was initially impeached in the first of his historic 2 impeachments, after he attempted to pressure a foreign ally to dig up dirt against Joe Biden and his family. And we remember when President Trump turned a mob of insurrectionists loose on our Capitol, where they violently attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power leading to his second impeachment. I will never forget that day as long as I live, January 6th. It has been my honor to serve in this chamber 29 years. I've seen a lot. I'm honored to represent a great state like Illinois, but I will never forget that moment when we were sitting here counting the Electoral College votes as to what the American people had decided on the next president. Vice President Pence was presiding. We were seated in our chairs. I noticed something unusual. Those 2 doors opened and 4 or 5 people walked in up to the vice president and literally yanked him out of his chair and took him out the door. We knew there was a political demonstration outside, but all of a sudden it turned bad and scary and dangerous. The Capitol Police came in and announced to us seated in this chamber, stay in your desks. We're going to make this a safe chamber in the Capitol. Don't worry about those people demonstrating outside. They're not going to get close to the chamber. Just stay where you are. We looked at one another and thought, what's next? Well, what was next was 10 minutes later, the same policeman came in and said, leave immediately. Don't take anything with you. Just get out of the chamber. It's too dangerous for you to stay here. And we all, Democrats and Republicans, filed out those doors. You know what happened next. The insurrectionists took over this building. It was one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of the United States Capitol building. Imagine, if you will, for a moment, if you heard the news that the House of Commons in Parliament had its door broken down and people raided the chamber. You'd say to yourself, what is going on in England, for goodness sakes? The House of Commons taken over by people in the street? That is exactly what happened here. And it happened on January 6th. And so this president, embarrassed by that moment, maybe, who knows if he's ever embarrassed, decided he would go after the people who prosecuted the insurrectionists, the people who were prosecuted for crimes like beating up policemen. You all came here today and we welcome you to this chamber. The reason you're safe in this building today is a lot of women and men in uniform who are guarding you and me and all of our staff so that we can do the people's business. Those people were under attack by the January 6th insurrectionists. These were not curious tourists who came in here. They ended up beating on these police, and 140 of them were seriously injured. If you believe it, in this second administration, the president has gone further than Richard Nixon and what he's done before. His political appointees have fired FBI agents and federal prosecutors who were called on to prosecute the insurrectionists. He has installed loyalists whose chief qualification is their loyalty to him, not their loyalty to the law or the Constitution. We recently learned a top federal prosecutor in Sacramento was fired after she advised the Border Patrol to comply with a court order. Yes, the Trump administration fired a career prosecutor for following a court order. Never in our history in the history of our country has a president so brazenly demanded the baseless prosecution of his rivals, and he doesn't even try to conceal it or hide it. He glories in this constitutional outrage. In a social media post, President Trump issued a command to Attorney General Bondi, and I quote, "They impeached me twice and indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. We can't delay any longer." He's referring to the prosecution of James Comey. Imagine that, a sitting president commanding his attorney general to prosecute state and federal officials who simply tried to uphold the rule of law. That's exactly what this president is doing. What Richard Nixon was stopped from doing, he is doing. Since Watergate, Republican and Democratic presidents alike respect the independence of the Justice Department, recognizing that shielding it from the pull of politics was essential to safeguarding the rule of law. Under President Trump, those constitutional guardrails have been removed, destroyed. I want to be clear. What you're seeing from the Trump White House is not normal. This just isn't some inside the Beltway drama. If the president can turn the Department of Justice and the FBI into his own personal police force to target his political enemies, he can just as easily turn it against ordinary Americans. And the dam is already starting to break. The president sent active duty forces into Los Angeles earlier this year to put down protest of his administration's cruel immigration raids. He threatened to make war on the city of Chicago, which I'm honored to represent, by sending forces into that city as well as Memphis, Tennessee, and has now ordered the military to Portland with authorization to use, quote, full force in Portland, Oregon. The governor of Oregon, the mayor of Portland said what the president said about being at war and unlivable is just plain wrong, and yet he does it. It's a slippery slope into authoritarianism. Once DOJ and our military have been politicized, there are few guardrails left. So while today it's Letitia James and James Comey who are the targets, tomorrow it could be our fellow citizens who dare to even criticize the policies of the Trump regime. That is the risk we face and the danger that lies ahead in this perilous moment. That's why I've opened an investigation calling for answers from Attorney General Bondi, including making available several Trump-installed loyalists for questioning. The American people deserve to know if the chief law enforcement agency of the United States is following the Constitution or pursuing political revenge. Let me end this. During the Watergate scandal, President Nixon attempted to bend the Department of Justice to his will, to go after his enemies, conceal his administration's involvement in this unlawful conduct. When President Nixon did this, Democrats and Republicans on a bipartisan basis in Congress sounded the alarm together and defended the rule of law. On a bipartisan basis, we responded to Nixon. Those legislatures recognized the danger posed by a president attempting to wield power and benefit him personally. They knew it was unconstitutional, and they stood firm on a bipartisan basis in Congress. Where is that same courage today? It's time for the Republicans to join Democrats and step up and say enough is enough. This is not about political parties. It's about protecting our democracy from a would-be dictator intent on setting it all ablaze to achieve his personal aims. This is a code red alarm for the rule of law. And unless we come together to stop the president's abuses, I fear this administration will continue to corrode our American democracy. My question is this: is there one Republican senator in this chamber who gives a damn? I yield the floor.
senator from Texas.
Madam President, are we at a quorum call?
We are not.
Madam President, I want to begin my remarks this afternoon by reflecting on the tragic shooting at the Dallas ICE facility that happened just last week. One detainee was killed and 2 others were injured by a 29-year-old shooter who was later found dead on the scene from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. This is not the first attack of its kind against the immigration enforcement officials in Texas. In fact, this is a 4th in as many months. 4 attacks against law enforcement officials in the last 4 months. On July the 4th in Alvarado, Texas, assailants opened fire outside an ICE detention facility, wounding an Alvarado Police Department officer in the neck. 10 people were subsequently arrested and charged with attempted murder, while 6 other subjects have been charged with related offenses. 3 days later, July 7th, a man shot at a Border Patrol employee in McAllen as he tried to park his car. He then fired at the Border Patrol annex, attempting to break in before finally being killed in a firefight with Border Patrol agents. In addition to these attacks on law enforcement, we know our country is still reeling from the horrific murder of Charlie Kirk, whose life was taken from him simply for expressing his views and engaging in political dialogue on college campuses. We're beginning to see in our country a level of political violence that is not and should not ever be considered normal. But this is a warning signal about the direction we are heading in as a nation, and it's one we cannot afford to ignore. Many of us are asking ourselves, how did we get here? Well, the answer, it seems, or at least part of the answer, is simple and straightforward. It begins with the demonizing of free speech and the vilification of those who are doing nothing more and nothing less than their duty, which is to enforce the laws on the books. Frequently, these are laws that are passed by Congress on a bipartisan basis and signed into law by the president. And these law enforcement officials are simply enforcing the laws that we have written. The radical base of the Democratic Party seems to be at war with the men and women who actually enforce our laws. And with the same breath, they seem to, from time to time, celebrate mob violence. We all remember the so-called peaceful protests of 2020 that resulted in massive economic losses and harms to businesses. Not to mention that many law enforcement officers were injured or even died as a result of mob violence. And embarrassingly, it was a Texas member of the House of Representatives, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who recently said on national television, she said, quote, "When I see ICE, I see slave patrols," close quote. Not to be outdone, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez described ICE as, quote, "a rogue agency that should not exist." And then there's the former member of Congress, Colin Allred, who called ICE, quote, "un-American and harmful to public safety." These attacks against the men and women who enforce our laws are simply unconscionable, and they've undeniably contributed to getting us in the dangerous place we find ourselves in today. If these individuals and other Democrats truly cared about public safety, they would stand with the Republicans. We would stand united as Americans and supporting our men and women in blue and green, and they would denounce the unprecedented rise in attacks against these law enforcement officers immediately. But instead, Democrats seem to endorse a complete inversion of how a just and ordered society functions. Unfortunately, this is going to require some of our Democratic colleagues to swim against the tide of opinion among their radical base and show some leadership. But they have to decide as a party to move away from the dangerous and radical demands of their left-wing base. Unfortunately, the Democratic leader in this chamber, the senator from New York, is showing anything but that kind of leadership right now. He's demonstrated a complete unwillingness to tone down the rhetoric of his party or to make actually even good faith gestures toward good governance. In fact, this very week, he's demonstrated just how far he's willing to go to undermine basic governance in order to appease his radical base. He'd rather shut down the government than work across the aisle for the benefit of the American people. Senate Democrats have so far refused to even vote on a simple stopgap measure that will give us a little more time, about 9 weeks, to negotiate full-year government funding. If they do not relent in this partisan posturing, the result will be forever known as the Schumer shutdown. Now, you don't have to take it from me on what a government shutdown would mean for the American people. All we have to do is to read back to them the very words that the Senate Democrats have said in the past. In September of last year, when the shoe was on the other foot, Senator Schumer said, and I quote, "If the government shuts down, it will be average Americans who suffer the most." He also said, a government shutdown means seniors who rely on Social Security could be thrown into chaos. Is this even the same individual that's taking the position that's heading us toward a shutdown in the coming days? Last September, he went so far as to even say keeping the government open will mean no poison pills or reckless partisan posturing. This is what he said just last year about a government shutdown. Where is that man today? Today, I'll tell you, he's engaging in a reckless partisan posturing while Republicans are proposing a responsible alternative. Again, this is not a vote on a permanent policy, but rather a stopgap measure to get us to a place where we need to be when it comes to the appropriations process. But he's willing to impose the very costs that he warned about on the American people and our seniors in order to score political points with his progressive radical base. The hypocrisy is obvious and it's staggering. Madam President, it's a time for reckoning for our friends in the Democratic Party. They seem to not really know what they stand for these days, except opposition to each and everything that the majority party or the president wants, even when it's in their self-interest to do so. They need to look at themselves in the mirror and decide what and who they stand for. Are they going to be the party of violence and lawlessness and a degradation in public safety? Are they going to continue to this, what has been called frighteningly, an assassination culture? Will they continue down this mad path of taking the lives of those they disagree with and siding with the criminals over law enforcement personnel that are simply enforcing laws they have themselves helped write? And will they continue on prioritizing their ideology ahead of responsible governance? I often wonder how our friends on the other side of the aisle would react if they had to live in crime-ridden neighborhoods, overtaken by gangs and drug dealers, and they had to wait 20 or 30 minutes before any police officer responded to their calls for help after an assault or a robbery. How would they feel? Well, I'm quite sure, I'm confident that they would change their tune. And just like current residents in blue cities who've had to suffer under the weight of failed Democratic soft-on-crime policing policies, they would gladly welcome additional police protection and efforts to clean up and stabilize their neighborhoods. But sadly, most Democrats, at least so far, here in Washington, D.C., have appeared to be completely tone deaf and rarely hear the true voices of the people whose lives they assume they represent, people living in these inner cities. Well, regardless of what Democrats decide to stand for, Republicans will continue to be the party that respects free and open discussion of ideas. And we will continue to support our law enforcement officers, men and women, who risk their lives day in and day out so that Texans and all Americans can sleep soundly in their beds. And we'll continue to be the party that opposes reckless partisan tactics that put ideology ahead of the needs of the American people. Republicans have made it clear under President Trump that we will enforce the rule of law. That is non-negotiable. So it's no surprise that the American people overwhelmingly voted for Republican leadership last November. If Democrats continue to head down this path of violence and division, they should not be surprised if they continue to experience the same outcome at the ballot box in the upcoming midterms as they did last November in the general election. Madam President, I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsterbrooks.
President, for the first time since all of these issues started, even though we have requested repeated meetings with Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, and the President, we have very large differences on health care and on their ability to undo whatever budget we agree to through rescission and through impoundment, as well as pocket rescissions. And I think for the first time, the President heard our objections and heard why we needed a bipartisan bill. Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not. We've made to the President some proposals. Our Republican leaders will have to talk to them about them, but ultimately he's the decision maker. And if he will accept some of the things we asked, which we think the American people are for, on health care and on rescissions, he can avoid a shutdown. But there are still large differences between us.
There was a frank and direct discussion with the President of the United States and Republican leaders, but significant and meaningful differences remain. Democrats are fighting to protect the health care of the American people. And we are not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of everyday Americans. Period. Full stop. There's a Republican-caused healthcare crisis that is causing hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health clinics all across the country, in rural America, urban America, small-town America, the heartland of America, and Black and brown communities throughout this country. And that crisis is happening right now. And that's why we believe there is urgency to both keeping the government open, reaching a bipartisan spending agreement that actually meets the needs of the American people in terms of their health, their safety, their economic well-being and quality of life, while also addressing the dangerous Republican healthcare crisis.
We laid out to the President some of the consequences of what's happening in healthcare. And by his face and by the way he looked, I think he heard about them for the first time. The closing of rural hospitals. The fact that so many clinics are closing. And I don't know if he knew this before, but the fact that people will pay $4,000 more a year, $400 more a month, close to $5,000 more a year on their health care premiums if we don't do anything. And people don't know what to do. The average working family can't afford that. I told him how I met a mother who was crying to me because her daughter had cancer. And what has happened with health care, with what they have done, she's going to watch her daughter suffer and maybe die. And so he seemed to, for the first time, understand the magnitude of this crisis. And we hope he'll talk to the Republican leaders and tell them we need bipartisan input on health care, on rescissions into their bill. Their bill does not have they never talk to us. Thune didn't negotiate with me. Johnson didn't negotiate with Hakeem. And on the key issues, the Appropriations Committee, which has talked about 3 of the smaller bills, they're good bills, they said the appropriators couldn't agree and said, kick it up to the 4 leaders. They still haven't talked.
Let me say, we're deadly serious about addressing the Republican-caused healthcare crisis because it's a deadly serious issue for the American people. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health clinics closing right now. The fact that more than 20 million Americans are on the brink of experiencing dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which benefit working class Americans. And we pointed that out. I pointed that out. Working class Americans, their health care. That's what we're fighting to preserve, to defend, and to strengthen.
Thank you. Question? Yeah, we're going to take questions or not? No. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Powers that have once again waved the white flag of surrender by failing to present the American people with legislation that would make the cuts necessary to balance the budget. Under the proposed continuing resolution or the automatic continuing resolution we'll vote on tonight, the budget never balances. Even if you take it out, as far as the eye can see, revenue will never meet expenditures. So it's just not something I can support, and I don't think it's a conservative proposal. Spending has gotten so out of control that this freeze, even over a decade, doesn't put a dent in the deficit. Presidents of both parties pay lip service to the idea that the national debt must be addressed, and yet it gets worse under both parties. People ask me, whose fault is it, Republicans or Democrats? And I just say yes. It's both parties. The right.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We just had a very frank conversation with the Senate and House Democratic leadership. Look, the principle at stake here is very simple. We have disagreements about tax policy, but you don't shut that government down. We have disagreements about healthcare policy, but you don't shut the government down. You don't use your policy disagreements as leverage to not pay our troops, to not have essential services of government actually function. You don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse for shutting down the people's government and all the essential services that come along with it. If you look at what Chuck Schumer has said in the past consistently, it's whatever our disagreements are, let's negotiate with them. Let's talk about them. Let's figure out a bipartisan solution, but you don't shut the government down. In other words, you don't put a gun to the American people's head and say, unless you do exactly what Senate and House Democrats want you to do, we're going to shut down your government. That's exactly what they're proposing out there. Now, we have to remember, they're very frustrated. They say that they're very frustrated about the fact that this negotiation has not taken place until today. But if you look at the original thing they did with this negotiation, it was a $1.5 trillion spending package, basically saying to the American people, we want to give massive amounts of money, hundreds of billions of dollars to illegal aliens for their health care, while Americans are struggling to pay their health care bills. That was their initial foray into this negotiation. We thought it was absurd. We told them it was absurd, and now they come in here as saying that if you don't give us everything that we want, we're going to shut down the government. We think that's preposterous. We think it's totally unacceptable, and we think the American people are going to suffer because these guys won't do the right thing. Now, I want to make one final point here. You will hear a lot from Senate Democrats, from House Democrats about the fact that American healthcare policy is broken. Well, we know that American healthcare policy is broken. We've been trying to fix it for the 8 months that we've been in office, but every single thing that they accuse about being broken about American healthcare is policy the Democrats have supported for the past decade. So if they want to talk about how to fix American healthcare policy, let's do it. The Speaker would love to do it. The Senate Majority Leader would love to do it. Let's work on it together, but let's do it in the context of an open government that's providing essential services to the American people. That's all that we're proposing to do, and the fact that they refuse to do that shows how unreasonable their position is. I think we're headed to a shutdown because the Democrats won't do the right thing. I hope they change their mind, but we're going to see. I'll let the Speaker say a few words.
Thank you, Vice President Vance. I want to thank the President as well. They showed strong leadership today. They invited the 4 leaders over here because the President is operating in good faith, and he demonstrated that very well. The problem is that Chuck Schumer and Leader Jeffries refuse to acknowledge the simple facts. Let's review what the simple facts are. As the Vice President was saying, this is the common sense thing to do. This is the right thing to do. This is the simple thing to do. By way of review, the House is getting back to the way the regular appropriations process is supposed to work. 12 separate appropriations bills passed through the House Appropriations Committee, 3 off the floor. The Senate doing their work as well. All this in bipartisan fashion, by the way. They passed 3 bills in the Senate. Those bills don't match up exactly. So for the first time in years, since 2019, you have a conference committee that is being constituted between the House and the Senate. This is the way a bill becomes a law. They work out the differences. All this is happening in bipartisan fashion. The problem is we've run out of clock. September 30th is the end of the fiscal year, so we need a little more time. So what we did in the Republican majority is the right, responsible, simple thing. A clean, continuing resolution, a short-term, nonpartisan continuing resolution. It's only 24 pages in length. Leader Thune has a copy if you want to see the exhibit. There's nothing partisan in here. No policy writers, none of our big party preferences, because we want to do the right thing by the American people and allow more time for negotiation. Now, there's a reason that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have come out here and stomped the feet saying that they can't go along with this. They're trying to bring in extraneous issues. They issued a counter proposal. You should go take a look at what they requested. $1.5 trillion in new spending that is unrelated to the ongoing appropriations process. They wanted to, as you said, restore taxpayer-funded benefits, okay? Hardworking taxpayers in America. They want to take your funds and give that for benefits to illegal aliens. They want to restore that because we got rid of it. They want to prop up left-leaning media outlets. $500 million they threw in on top of that. $1.5 trillion on a 7-week stopgap funding measure. We're not going to do that. They know we can't do that. And we never have in the past. During the Biden administration, there were 13 threatened shutdowns. The Republicans in the minority did the right thing. We kept the government open. We're simply asking for the Democrats to do the same. Again, I want to thank President Trump for the strong, solid leadership. He listened to the arguments, and they just wouldn't acknowledge the simple facts. I want to thank Vice President here for showing his leadership as well. If the Democrats make the decision to shut the government down, the consequences are on them, and I think it's absolutely tragic. We've never said that was a good idea. We never believed it is. And I want you to remember, when we voted in the House, we passed it out of the House. The House has done its job. We did that almost 2 weeks ago. Every Democrat in the House except one voted to shut the government down. That is the record, and don't forget it. I'll ask Leader Thune to step in here.
Well, thanks, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President. This right here, ladies and gentlemen, is what we're talking about. 24 pages. It's a continuing resolution to fund the government through November the 21st. I don't know where they're saying this is some huge partisan thing. This is something we do fairly routinely. And when the Democrats had the majority on 13 different occasions, they had the majority, President Biden was in the White House, we passed continuing resolutions to fund the government. This is purely and simply hostage taking on behalf of the Democrats. The Republicans are united. House Republicans, Senate Republicans, President Trump. The House has passed a clean funding resolution to fund the government until November the 21st. It's clean, it is bipartisan, and it is short term. But it gives us enough time to finish the appropriations process, which is the way we should be funding the government. So Republicans in the House, the Senate, President United, they passed the bill. This is sitting right now at the Senate desk. We could pick it up and pass it tonight. We could pick it up and pass it tomorrow before the government shuts down. And then we don't have a government shutdown. It is totally up to the Democrats, because right now they are the only thing standing between the American people and the government shutting down. We're all in favor of funding the government. And this is something that's been done routinely 13 different times by the Democrats when they had the majority. So it's to me, it's purely a hostage-taking exercise on the part of the Democrats. We are willing to sit down and work with them on some of the issues they want to talk about, whether it's the extension of premium tax credits with reforms. We're happy to have that conversation. But as of right now, this is a hijacking of the American people, and it's the American people who are going to pay the price.
Can you respond to Senator?
You want to say a few words?
Sure. We want to keep this government open. It is not good for the American people to have the government shut down for any period of time. We will manage it appropriately, but it is something that can all be avoided. It can all be avoided by accepting a reasonable position, which is what the House has passed and what sits at the Senate desk, which is to continue to fund the government with a short-term continuing resolution. It has never been a viewpoint that $1.5 trillion is a reasonable amount of spending to be included on a short-term CR. This is hostage-taking. It is not something that we are going to accept, and we hope that the Democrats come back from the brink, fund this government, and allow us to move forward. Thank you.
Great.
Can you respond? So just to be clear, is there room for negotiation here with Democrats? And you mentioned you believe that we are headed toward a government shutdown. Is the federal government preparing to fire federal workers if the government does shut down?
Well, first of all, we have to keep essential services functioning as well as possible if the Democrats shut down the government, and Russ has been tasked with making sure that's possible. Now, you asked about negotiations. One of the things I admired about the president, but frankly the entire team's approach during the conversation we just had with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries was, they have some crazy ideas. Giving taxpayer money to illegal aliens for healthcare, that's a crazy idea. Funding transgender surgeries in Peru, that's a crazy idea. But they had some ideas that I actually thought were reasonable, and they had some ideas that the president thought was reasonable. reasonable. What's not reasonable is to hold those ideas as leverage and to shut down the government unless we give you everything that you want. There were multiple times where Leader Jeffries or Leader Schumer would say, you know what, we should be doing this. And the President of the United States would say, yeah, absolutely, let's have that conversation. But we're going to do it in the context of the people's government being open. We're not going to let you take the people's government hostage and then give you everything you want. And that's really the state of the negotiation. Yeah, let's have a conversation. Let's have a negotiation. But we're not going to shut down the government because we won't give the Democrats everything that they want.
Can you respond to what Senator Schumer said, that there were aspects about healthcare and things for people that the president was learning about for the first time in that meeting? And was the president open to a deal on AC subsidies?
Well, I'm highly skeptical that the president was learning about it for the first time, thanks to Chuck Schumer. But what I will say is, look, we have put a $50 billion rural hospital fund into the big, beautiful bill that we passed a few months ago, because we know that under Biden administration's policies, there are a lot of small town hospitals, a lot of rural health care that was getting shut down and that was struggling. We're trying to fix that problem. In fact, we're happy to work with Democrats to fix that problem. We want to work across the aisle to make sure that people have access to good health care. We are not going to let Democrats shut down the government, take a hostage unless we give them everything that they want. That's not how the people's government has ever worked. That's certainly not how it's going to work under the Trump administration.
Go ahead, please. This is very important on health care. Their counterproposal, what Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are demanding, is that they claw back the $50 billion that we put into the rural hospital support structure. They want to take that back. We're not going to do that. We passed that because we have to allow for that. Also, if they shut the government down, not only are troops unpaid, federal workers, and all the services that everybody relies upon, but the WIC program, the nutrition program, women, infant, and children, they will not get that program, will not be funded. FEMA won't be funded. We have hurricanes off the coast of the United States right now. This is serious business. You have telehealth, you have mental health services, all that's funded by the government would stop if Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and the Democrats have their way. The Democrat shutdown would be damaging for the country. We can't allow for it.
Thank you all. Was there any mention of passing a shorter CR?
Long ago that my colleagues, at least on this side of the aisle, stood united in opposition to this fiscal recklessness. Wasn't that long ago that we drew a line in the sand on debt and the debt ceiling, that we demanded spending caps, that we said we wouldn't mortgage our children's future to fund today's political convenience. Now some seem content to roll over and lock in the very policies that we ran against. I won't do that. And I won't urge my colleagues to do that either. We can't claim to be fiscal conservatives while voting for more and more debt. We can't claim to be this great opposition to the Biden spending levels and then vote the Biden spending levels in. We can't claim to not like deficit spending and then vote for spending that will inevitably lead to another $2 trillion in debt next year. This country can't afford to write another blank check. We can't afford to lock in the fiscal mistakes of the past. We need real reform. We need it now. We need to return to the principles of limited constitutional government. If we obeyed the Constitution, most of the nonsense, most of the spending that goes on up here really isn't authorized under the Constitution. If we return to the Constitution, the principles of limited government, responsible budgeting, and economic freedom, we'd have a balanced budget again. We need to start today.
with respect to the Walls nomination and calendar number 161, Senate 2806.
Without objection. That's it. The senator from Mississippi.
We had a quorum call.
We are not.
Madam President, I expect the distinguished minority leader, my friend from New York, will speak possibly after the first vote and report that we're still at an impasse on funding the government, which of course expires at midnight tomorrow night. At that point, I want to implore my colleagues on this side of the aisle, and particularly the Democratic leader, to agree that while we're at an impasse, there is still very, very important business to attend to, and that is the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which, as the president knows, has been reported from the Senate Armed Services Committee some months ago by an overwhelming majority vote with only one dissenting vote. I think it was a vote of 24-1. That bill was reported to the floor. Our side of the cloakroom has run several hotlines, and we've been ready to go now for several days. Our disappointment has been that while the distinguished ranking member of the Armed Services Committee has been willing to proceed, and a number of our friends on both sides of the dais, Republican and Democrat, on the Armed Services Committee have been willing to proceed, we don't have engagement yet from the minority leadership. And so I simply want to express aloud what I hope I can engage the senator from New York about when he does speak. While we're at an impasse and the Senate is still in session, it seems to me a reasonable thing to do to bring this bipartisan, non-controversial, but highly significant bill to the floor. We've agreed to a manager's package on our side. We actually have 985 member-driven items already in the National Defense Authorization Act. We've agreed to a number of amendments and a second manager's package. There's very little difference on what will be brought to the Senate for votes. And it just seems to me that we don't need to sit around idly while negotiations perhaps are going on with the White House, with the House and the Senate. We need to proceed to this very essential legislation, the National Defense Bill. And if we could get that done this week, I think it would show to our constituents back home in both parties, independent, Republican and Democrat, that we are serious about the business of protecting the United States, enacting this very important legislation, the changes we need so that we're not doing last decade's type of national defense, but doing our job under the Constitution to make sure the United States is strong. So I would make that request to my Democratic friends and to my Republican friends, most of whom on our side are ready to proceed and have been ready to proceed on the National Defense Authorization Act. And I yield the floor, Madam President.
Motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Michael G. Waltz of Florida to be representative of the United States of America to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations. Signed by 17 senators.
Under the previous order, the mandatory quorum call under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that the debate on the nomination of Michael G. Waltz of Florida to be representative of the United States of America to the sessions of the General Assembly of the United Nations during his tenure of service as representative of the United States of America to the United Nations shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Glenn Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt. Aye. Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corman, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Holven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Marino, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin,
Let's try this.
Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Blackburn, Britt, Cornyn, Crapo, Daines, Fetterman, Fisher, Grassley, McCormick, Tillis, and Wicker. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Cortez Masto, Durbin, Gallego, Gillibrand, Kane, Kim, Klobuchar, Merkley, Murphy, Murray, Paul, Peters, Sanders, Schatz, Van Hollen, Warner, and Warren. Ms. Baldwin, no. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Marshall, Aye. Mr. Heinrich? Mr. Heinrich? No. Mr. Budd? Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Marino? Mr. Marino, aye. Mrs. Hyde-Smith? Mrs. Hyde-Smith, aye. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Lujan? Mr. Lujan? No. Mr. Warnock? Mr. Warnock, no. Mr. Langford? Mr. Langford, aye. Mr. Bennett? Mr. Bennett, no. Mr. Ossoff? Mr. Ossoff, no. Ms. Duckworth? Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Scott? Scott of South Carolina, aye.
Pretty good. How are you?
Ms. Hassan? Ms. Hassan, no. Ms. Smith? Ms. Smith,
Alabama candidate?
no. Mrs. Capito? Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Johnson? Mr. Johnson, aye. Ms. Cantwell? Ms. Cantwell, no. Mr. Reed? Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso. Aye. Mr. Cassidy. Mr. Cassidy. Aye. Mr. Justice. Mr. Justice. Aye.
Make a field trip.
Mr. Padilla. Mr. Padilla. No. Ms. Hirono. Ms. Hirono. No. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer. Aye. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden. No.
Hey, Peter.
Mr. Welch. Mr. Welch. No. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins.
I
Aye.
made salmon in honor of you.
Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly. Aye. Ms. Lummis. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy, aye. Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks, aye. Ms. Ernst. Ms. Ernst, aye. Ms. Blunt Rochester. Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mrs. Moody. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Markey. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran. Aye. Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen. No. Mr. Cotton. Mr. Cotton. Aye. Mr. Ricketts. Mr. Ricketts. Aye. Mr. Mullen. Mr. Mullen. Aye. Mr. Rounds. Mr. Rounds. Aye. Mr. Husted. Mr. Husted. Aye. Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Schmidt. Aye. Mr. King. Mr. King. No. Mr. Hickenlooper. Mr. Hickenlooper. No. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen. Aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven. Aye. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons. No. Mr. Hawley. Mr. Hawley. Aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal. No. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Curtis. Aye. Mr. Schiff. Mr. Schiff. No. Mr. Haggerty. Mr. Haggerty. Aye. Mr. Sheehy. Mr. Sheehy. Aye.
Well, the Cubs swept the Cardinals. You had secured.
Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee. Aye. Miss Slotkin. Miss Slotkin. No. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune. Aye. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell. Aye. Ms. Rakowski. Ms. Rakowski. Aye. Mr. Risch. Mr. Risch. Aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse. No.